Are you getting a bit fed up with paying for a Photoshop subscription? Especially when you only really use a handful of tools. Because honestly, I think a lot of people restoring family photos or organising old scans end up wondering the same thing. Is there a simpler alternative that can still do the important stuff? Enter Affinity Photo. It's often described as a Photoshop alternative, but the real question is whether it's actually good enough for the kinds of editing jobs photo organisers and family historians genuinely need. So in this video, I'm going to show you the parts of Affinity Photo I'd actually use in a real photo organising workflow. And stay until the end because I'll also show you how batch processing works in Affinity Photo. What Affinity Photo actually is. Now, before we get too excited, I think it's really important to understand what Affinity Photo actually is, because people often confuse photo editing tools with photo organising tools, and they are very different things. Affinity Photo is a photo editing tool. It is not a photo organiser, it is not a digital asset manager, and it's not designed for managing huge photo libraries. So this is not something you'd use to sort your photos, organise folders, remove duplicates, or manage your entire collection. What it is designed for is improving individual images. Things like restoring old family photos, fixing colour and exposure, removing scratch marks, repairing scans, and preparing photos for printing or sharing. And honestly, it's incredibly powerful for that kind of work. For most things people realistically want to do, the free version is already more than capable, which is going to make it really appealing for people who are fed up paying for a Photoshop subscription. Now, if you want some of the more advanced AI features like generative fill or background removal, you still need a Canva subscription for those tools. But for a lot of the restoration and photo improvement work we're talking about in this video, the standard version is already very capable. The things I actually use it for. Now, personally, I don't use Affinity Photo for every single image. Most photos honestly don't need this level of editing, but there are certain situations where it becomes incredibly useful, especially when you're dealing with old family photos, scanned images, negatives or damaged prints that need a bit more attention. So rather than turn this into a full Affinity Photo tutorial, I want to focus on things I genuinely use it for in real photo organising projects. The tools and workflows that actually help improve photos, restore memories and make images easier to preserve, print and share long term. Restoring old photos. This is probably where I use Affinity Photo the most. When you're working with old family photos, scanned prints or damaged images, there's often little imperfections you want to improve without completely changing the photo itself. And honestly, this is where Affinity Photo becomes incredibly useful, because it gives you much more control than the basic editing tools inside most photo apps. Blemish Removal Tool. The Blemish Removal Tool is a really quick and easy way to clean up tiny imperfections in old photos, things like dust spots, little marks, and very small scratches. First, go into the pixel area. Then, in the toolbar on the left, find the Blemish Removal Tool. It's grouped with the In-Painting Brush tool, so click the little arrow to open the extra options, then select Blemish Removal Tool. At the top, you can adjust the brush size depending on the area you're working on. Before you start brushing, make sure you've selected your image layer in the Layers panel on the right-hand side. Then simply brush over the damaged part of the photo. Affinity will try to blend the repair naturally into the surrounding image, which makes it really useful for small scratches, marks, and damaged areas. Healing Brush Tool. Now, while the Blemish Removal Tool is great for tiny spots and very short scratches, once you start dealing with larger damaged areas, the Healing Brush tool usually works much better. This gives you much more control because you can choose exactly which part of the image Affinity should copy from when repairing the damage. So it's really useful for things like longer scratches, damaged backgrounds, folds, or larger imperfections in scanned family photos. In the same area as the Blemish Removal tool, find the Healing Brush tool and select it. At the top, you can adjust the size of the brush, along with things like opacity and hardness depending on the type of repair you're doing. Then press and hold the Option key on Mac or Alt on Windows and click on an area you want to sample from. This tells Affinity which part of the image you want to use for the repair. Then simply brush over the damaged area you want to fix. Affinity will blend the repair into the surrounding image, helping the damaged section look much more natural. Dust and scratches filter. Another useful option for scanned photos is the dust and scratches filter. This can be really helpful when you've got a photo with lots of tiny marks, dust spots or little imperfections across the image rather than one specific area you want to repair by hand. It's not something I'd use heavily because it can soften the photo if you push it too far, but for a quick cleanup, it can be really useful. Still in the pixel area, go to the pixel menu. Then choose filters, then noise and select dust and scratches. I'd start with the threshold set to 0 and the radius around 2. Then slowly increase the threshold until you start to see the small marks reduce. The key here is to go gently. If you push it too far, the image can start to look soft or slightly plastic. So you want just enough to clean up the worst marks without losing too much detail. Denoise tool. Another tool I find really useful for older scans is the Denoise filter. This is especially helpful for grainy scanned prints, old negatives, or photos that have a lot of digital noise after scanning. Again, this is one of those tools where subtle adjustments usually work much better than aggressive ones. Go to the pixel menu again, then choose filters, then noise and select Denoise. I'd normally start by keeping the luminance and luminance detail around 50%. Then slowly adjust the luminance sliders to reduce the noise in the image. The important thing here is to make small adjustments and keep checking the detail in faces, hair and textures. Because if you push it too far, the image can start losing detail and look overly smooth or artificial. Color correction for scanned photos. Another really common issue with old printed photos, especially photos that have been sitting in albums for years, is the colour starts to shift. You often see this red or faded look where the photo has lost the contrast and the colours don't feel natural anymore. This is where Affinity Photo can be really useful because you've got a quick automatic option if you want to improve things fast, but you can also use curves if you want more control. The quickest option is to go to the pixel menu. Then choose filters, then colours and select auto levels. This can instantly improve the contrast and colour balance, and sometimes that's enough to bring the photo back to life. But if you want more control, you can use curves. Go to the pixel menu, then choose new adjustment layer and select curves. You can also get to this from the adjustments button at the bottom right, then choose curves. From there, select each individual colour channel, red, green and blue, and gently adjust the curve until the colours start looking more natural. Curves gives you much finer control over brightness, contrast and faded colours. So if the photo still looks too red, too flat or too washed out, you can carefully tweak the curve until you're happy with the result. The key is not to overdo it. You're not trying to make the photo look brand new, you're just trying to bring back enough colour and contrast so the image feels alive again. Now if you're watching this and thinking, this all looks really useful, but my bigger problem is actually organising the thousands of digital photos I already have, you are definitely not alone. Because honestly, editing tools like Affinity Photo are only a small part of the process. The real challenge for most people is figuring out how to sort everything, reduce the clutter, and organising their library properly and create a system that's actually manageable long term. And that's exactly what I help with inside my Photo Mess Success courses. They guide you step by step through organising your digital photos properly, reducing overwhelm, and building a workflow that actually works in real life. So if your photo collection feels chaotic and you want a clear system behind it all, you can find out more information at photomesssuccess.co.uk. Right, let's look at one more really useful workflow inside Affinity Photo. Converting negative scans. Another thing I occasionally use Affinity Photo for is converting scanned negatives into actual colour photos. Now some scan software will do this automatically or in batch, But if you've scanned negatives as raw images or you want a bit more control over the result, Affinity Photo can handle it surprisingly well. And honestly, for a quick manual conversion, it's actually very simple. Start by opening your scanned negative image in Affinity Photo. Then go to the Pixel menu and select Invert. This will immediately flip the negative into a positive image. Now at this point, the colours will usually still look a bit strange, flat or faded. So the next step is adjusting the image properly. Go to the Pixel menu, then choose New Adjustment Layer and select Curves. You can also access curves from the Adjustments button at the bottom right. From there, gently adjust the curves until the colours and brightness start looking more natural. You may also want to make a few small exposure adjustments as well, depending on how the negative was scanned. Again, the key is to work slowly and make subtle changes rather than trying to force the image too quickly. Cropping and rotating scanned photos. Another thing I use Photoshop for all the time in photo organising projects is cropping and rotating scanned photos. Especially when you're working with batches of old prints, things are rarely perfectly straight. You end up with wonky scans, borders around the edges, a bit of scanner bed showing, or photos that just need tidying up before you archive them properly. And yes, Affinity Photo can absolutely do this. You can crop, rotate, straighten images, clean up the edges without any problem. But this is one area where I do think Photoshop still has the advantage. Because in Affinity Photo, it's much more manual. There isn't really the same level of smart auto crop, auto straightening that you get in Photoshop, especially when you're dealing with lots of scanned images. So for one or two photos, it's completely fine. But if you're working through large batches of family scans, this can become a slower and more repetitive process quite quickly. Batch processing. And finally, let's look at batch processing. This is useful if you want to apply the same action to multiple images, but it's not quite as simple as just choosing a setting and running it. In Affinity Photo, you need to create a macro first, a bit like recording a macro in Excel. Go into the pixel area, then open the macro panel. Hit the record button, then carry out the action you want Affinity to repeat. When you're finished, hit stop. Then click to add it to your library, give it a name and save it. Once your macro is saved, you can run it as a batch. Go to File, then New Image Processing and choose Batch Job. Add the images you want to process, then choose where you want the finished files to be saved, either back to the original location or to a new folder. Next, choose the file format you want them saved as. Then select your macro, click Apply and press OK. Affinity will then run that action across all the images you selected. It's powerful, but this is also where I think it can become a bit more manual than people expect. So for repeated jobs, it's useful, but for quick one-off fixes, I'd usually just edit the image directly. So overall, I think Affinity Photo is a really capable tool for photo restoration and improving old scans, especially if you're looking for an alternative to paying for Photoshop every month. It's not a photo organizer, and it's definitely more manual in places. But for restoring family photos and cleaning up images, it can be incredibly powerful. And if you want to continue your photo organizing journey, then check out this little video next, where I walk you through the best ways to digitize old family photos properly. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more photo organizing tips. Have fun rediscovering your memories. I'll see you in my next video.